Okay, and then I'll start. Hi, everybody. My name is Lila. I'm a first-year master gardener and presenting today on contours, swales, and berms and how to use them in your garden to protect it from during drought times and catch the rainfall that you can when it does rain. So this talk is entitled Slow It, Spread It, Sink It, and Store It, because that's basically what these three gardening practices help you to do. So before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to record the presentation. You can ask questions in the chat. Please turn off your cameras and keep your mic on mute, and contact us at mgsandburn@ucanair.edu if you would like a copy of this presentation afterwards. And you can also save the chat if you want a copy of that as well. I'm going to skip through our beginning slides, as we just said, because I think you guys know who we are by now. So, slow it, spread it, sink it, and store it. Those are the four things that we're doing with swales, berms, and contouring it. The goal of these is to capture the rain when we do get it, to allow the water to percolate down into the soil rather than just creating like a holding pond, which obviously you can get mosquitoes and things like that. A contour, I'm sorry, not a contour, a swale and a berm. A swale is this kind of a valley or a depression in the soil that you create by kind of digging out a strip of land. And a berm is on the right-hand side where it says overflow. A berm is that raised portion. You can actually just take the soil that you dig out and toss it up on the side, and that will become your berm. The berm keeps the water from overflowing, although it can overflow if it needs to, in order to give the water time to percolate down. And at the bottom, you've got just your undisturbed soil. Then you can put gravel, you can put mulch, you can put compost in the bottom of that swale, and that helps the water to sink down and be absorbed rather than to run off. So these are things that, if you're resourceful, the drought doesn't mean the end of your trees and your landscape. It just means you need to do things differently with swales and berms. So as I mentioned before, the berms are the mounds, the raised areas that are going to slow or stop the water from running off on a hillside. So if you lay out your berm properly, you can hold water long enough for the water to begin percolating down into the soil. And the swales, again, are those little valley areas that can be part of your garden's natural landscaping, or they can be created to help ensure that proper drainage and minimize the runoff. So generally, they are shallow ditches with gently sloping sides. And here I just loved this picture of a berm and a swale. So the swale is sort of the ditch that has just, soil and a little bit of grass growing in there. And that is where the water, when it rains, the water is going to accumulate there. And the berm is the raised area along the side, kind of in the middle of the picture, where you can grow a lot of plants that don't want to have their feet in the water, but they need to be kept moist, but they don't want their feet actually in the water. So here is another picture showing how they work. And this is another picture of sort of a more city style swale and berm. So the swales are used to let gravity do the work of moving the rainwater along a gently sloping course instead of just running off the surface. The swale directs the water away from structures like your house and through either a straight or kind of a meandering depression that you're going to line with river rock, grasses, like I said, mulch, whatever vegetation can tolerate periods of being wet in the winter and dry in the summer. So if you have native plants, that will usually fit the bill. The key elements in building a swale, swales are not intended to move the water. They are there to hold the water to be absorbed. So soil in the swale should not be compacted or sealed off, but should be loose to encourage absorption. A manageable swale near your home is going to be from 6 to 12 inches deep and about twice as wide. And as I mentioned before, you can backfill the swale with sand or gravel on the bottom, covered by decaying wood or mulch, dried leaves or straw, and then you finish it off with some topsoil. And again, I'm just repeating here, the swale is going to speed the rate of the water seeping into the soil and deepen the storage of that water. Now, the berm. The berm is usually built by taking the leftover dirt from digging the swale out and form it along the downward side of the swale. So you want the berm to be on the downward side. You can seed that berm, as I mentioned before, with any kind of fast growing grass or legumes or really anything. The berm's purpose is to slow the water so it doesn't run off, it catches it and allows it to back up over the swale. So planting into your berm provides additional moisture and nutrients for your plants. So the berms can be either practical or aesthetic. I think I have some pictures later that show some very aesthetic ones. The berm can be constructed from soil to hold water in and around a tree, so the water doesn't just run away from the roots, but instead soaks down into the root system. You can also use it to slow or direct the runoff if you have a steep slope. So in this case, a berm is often accompanied by a swale, which absorbs the runoff water. Sometimes the berm is used in the landscape to create a natural looking raised bed or to highlight a certain focal point in your garden. They also commonly use them in golf courses. Let's stop. Well, actually, let me sum up and then I'll stop for questions. So basically, when you use these type of landscaping techniques, berms and swales, you're creating a garden that incorporates plants with a range of water needs. So if you site your drought tolerant plants on top of a berm, that's the best way to assure they don't become overwatered. And building the swale next to the berm will create a space for your thirstier plants. You plant them in the swale. So the water will run off the adjacent berm and settle in the swale, providing additional hydration to the plants there. So anything, any questions that come up, let me know. Betsy, if you could let me know if there's anything in the chat or if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question.
Yeah, there's nothing in the chat yet, but maybe somebody will unmute themselves or put something in the chat.
Okay, we'll pause.
Yes, I have a question. So are these like permanent, or do you have to rebuild them periodically? Do they break down, or how does that work?
They're designed to be what I would say semi-permanent. I think over time, swales are going to fill up a bit and berms, will kind of naturally, over 10 or 20 years, they're going to naturally, kind of erode down. But they're designed to be, fairly permanent.
Okay.
So you shouldn't have to like redo it every year or anything like that. You
Oh,
might
okay.
kind of maybe dig out the swale every 10 or 20 years, but I think we're looking at semi-permanent for those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Okay, we will move on. So now we're going to talk about contours. And contours are a way to use the land's shape and its contouring to reduce your need to irrigate. So in a drought, anything that helps us reduce your need to irrigate is a good thing. And it also helps to reduce erosion, which these two things are going to help maximize nutrients for your harvest yields of your veggies. It's a popular tool used in building a permaculture garden. Contouring is the practice of performing your tilling and planting and other kind of gardening or farming operations on or near the contour of the field slope to reduce erosion. So the crops are planted across a slope following the natural elevation contour lines rather than up and down the hill. So when you're planting along the natural curve of the land, gullies and soil erosion are reduced. And I love this picture on the left of this huge field, which, you know, if you didn't see the curves there, you would think this is a pretty flat field, but there's these beautiful contours there. And the gardener or farmer has just planted following those curves. And in the picture on the right, you see that the contouring is used in conjunction with terracing, which is very nice. So the best way to control runoff is by following the contour of the slope. Straight rows can be aligned across the slope to reduce runoff. And contours provide the advantage of increasing soil moisture and retention, similar to a swale. You can create a buffer strip of perennial plants, alternating with strips of cultivated plants, annuals, to slow runoff and trap sediment. And this can also enhance wildlife habitat for those perennial plants that, you know, are places the wildlife likes to find shelter. And here's another gorgeous picture. I just love this. I don't know where this was taken, but I think the Permaculture Research Institute, if I'm remembering correctly, is in the UK. And I just love seeing how they have constructed this little meandering contour line there. I don't know if that's a little path or what, but and they've also aligned the little rows of what's probably vegetables, just following those contours. Beautiful. Another nice thing is that contouring creates some microclimates of sun and shade, and that gives you diverse growing areas in your garden. And whenever you have diversity in your garden, you're improving your soil ecology and your rainwater infiltration. So how do you do this? Well, first, it's good to make a plan. You need to observe your garden and note, you know, where does the rain catch? Where does it flow? Where are the natural patterns on your property? And look for an open, mostly flat, kind of low spot to direct water towards in the front yard or anywhere with the center that's at least 10 feet away from your house foundation and 3 feet away from the sidewalk and neighbors. And then number 2, lay out your low spots. So you can take a garden hose, I guess you could take a piece of rope or anything and kind of outline the shape. And the area should be basically flat or slightly bowl-like, not sloping back toward the house. What you do not want is to inundate the foundation of your house by having the slope go toward the house. So when I say it's flat, what I mean is that the line of the contour is flat, not that, because obviously if you're on a slope, that's not flat, but the contour is kind of on a level, if that makes sense. And be careful around trees. You don't want to disturb your roots on a mature tree. But aside from that, you can remove everything, including grass, from the area and start digging. This is a good little cautionary graphic here that just kind of demonstrates keeping a good distance from the house, calculating the slope. I'm not going to get into the calculation of the slope. We've got some references at the end that will give you the difference there. but it's a nice graphic that kind of gives you an idea of what you'll want to take into consideration when you're building a contour. And here is just a sample of what your sketch might look like. So, you know, where your sidewalk is, where your walkways are, your porch, your driveway, and then just kind of mapping out where you want your contours to go. The third thing is it's good to do a percolation test, because if you have compacted soil, you're going to try to break through it with a shovel or a pitchfork. Compacted soil is not going to catch the rainwater. And then you're going to dig a basin that's between 6 inches and 12 inches deep at the center. And you're going to slope the sides gently to make a sloping bowl. You don't want a cylinder. You want it in a gently sloping bowl. And for every roughly 1,000 feet of roof area, you want to plan on creating a basin of around 150 square feet and 6 inches deep. Now, of course, this is going to depend on your property. You know, most of us are in fairly urban areas here, but I'm sure some of you have actual kind of farms and ranches. But if you're in a suburban area, obviously you don't have tons of space, but you might have a slope. So you need to really tailor this to what you have. You're going to mound the extra soil around the bowl to increase its holding capacity. And at the bottom of the basin, you're going to put down at least 1 inch of high quality compost or worm castings, and that will help activate the soil. And a good little reminder down here, don't dig deep without calling that 811 dig alert to make sure you're not going to cut through any of your utility lines. Don't want that. And now about mulches. You want to avoid these types of mulches around your plants. You can get these pretty much everywhere at the big box stores, but they're not recommended. A lot of these types of materials have been treated, and you don't know what they're treated with. Some of them can create or present fire hazards. And then the gravels and the rubbers are, they don't decompose. So they don't generate those good soil microbes that you're looking for from the mulching. And they tend to raise the temperature of the entire landscape where they're used. So we do not recommend those. Okay, getting on with the 8 steps of contouring your garden. Any downspouts you have from your roof for the rainwater, you want to direct those into the basin area. So it's going to move the rainwater through the gravel-lined ditches or above ground drainage pipes, and you're going to make an overflow path so that extra water has a direct channel away from your house. And you want to plan for any overflow. Make sure it isn't directed onto your neighbor's property. Just a little side note, I had that happen with my mom. Somebody built a French drain, which is kind of like a swale. And unfortunately, it went right into her neighbor's property and created an issue with them, because it was like flooding their front walkway. So make sure you plan for that, and you don't want to create problems with your neighbors. If possible, any overflow should just be directed into the street, the rain gutters. So when it rains, if it rains, we hope it rains, the basin will fill up. And so you'll get a temporary pond until the water soaks in. But all the water should be gone within 24 hours. If it isn't, it means you've got very compacted soil with very bad drainage, and that's a whole other problem that's kind of outside of our scope today in this short presentation. So that's it. Do we have any questions? Anything at all?